All right, hey everybody, welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. It's Coach Greg here with you. I got Coach Dustin, Coach Brad, and listen, tonight's gonna be a really cool episode. We're gonna talk about the shock and awe offensive. Okay, now, of course, let me just set this up even before we cut to our intro here. What is the shock and awe offensive? A lot of people have heard about the shock and awe. Okay, it's a military strategy based on using overwhelming force or overwhelming power with spectacular displays of force, which again is designed to kind of paralyze the enemy. Okay, so again, most people would have heard of it as a military strategy, but tonight we're going to talk about how the weaponizing process, how we use this in our strategies, and how it's so important and how you need to understand this so that you too can use it against violent criminals. Now, before I cut to the intro, I want to do this on the front end and normally do this on the back end. Listen, the podcast is getting more and more traction each week. And that's because of the guys, you guys listening to this, you protectors, the people that share the mindset, that are willing to get the training and protect themselves, their families, and their communities. And so I want to just thank you so much for that. And then just encourage you again, if you haven't done it already, to please don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review. If you feel we're worthy of it, 5 stars. It does more than what you can imagine to help us reach new men and allow them to hear what we're saying and make a decision to become part of this weaponizing process, become part of this movement. And this is not about our own personal training or my program. We don't pitch or sell anything on this program. It's about a mindset. It's about a core set of beliefs. And that is what we're trying to do, is to reach other men that think like we think, believe what we believe. Our justice system is broken. Our mental health care system is overloaded. The bail reform, and then we have more violent criminals being put back on the streets every single day, and they are reoffending, and good people are on the X. And so that's the problem. That's the gap. That's what we want to try to solve. And we just need more men to step up and weaponize. So we're going to do our part tonight by sharing with you the shock and awe offensive and how you can use that to protect yourself and your family. And we're going to be back in 30 seconds, and we're going to go deep. So stick with us. Violent criminal assault, and how for the past 30 years I've been helping good people just like you do the same. Welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. All right, everybody. Okay, so the shock and awe offensive. Now, the shock and awe offensive is, or the shock and awe strategy is, again, like I said, a military-based strategy. It is also goes by another name, which is rapid dominance. Okay, so if we just really quickly look at this, what is shock and awe? It is rapid dominance. That's it. Now, if you look back and remember in the Gulf War, what they did was they started a shock and awe campaign. So what they started to do was just lay down bombing runs. They just started to, again, fly in and bomb the shit out of certain military targets, right? So again, it's this idea where they're using overwhelming power and spectacular displays of force. So they're just throwing everything they can and overwhelming the enemy, right? Just literally pounding them into the fucking ground, taking out strategic military objectives, and just being like, listen, before we even get to the fucking fight, before we get our tanks rolling, before we get boots on the ground, before all of this stuff starts to happen and all of the door-to-door, street-to-street, block-to-block type fighting is going to happen, we're literally just going to fucking overwhelm you. Okay, so just create the shock and awe, knock out strategic things, try to, fuck up communication, try to just overwhelm the perceptions, break the will, and really just kind of altogether fucking muddle or fuck up the understanding of the enemy. Okay, so that's what a shock and awe campaign is. Now, if you look at this, you can understand the military application of it, but if you step back, there's absolutely a civilian way to use this. There's a strategic plan that civilians can use. And matter of fact, the weaponizing process, it is at the heart of our strategies. Now, just so that people are on the same page, when we talk about weaponizing, it's a process, right? It's the process for how you master the tool of violence to protect yourself, family, and property from violent criminal assault. Understand that the bad guys have a blueprint, right? And we study criminality and we break their blueprints down into one of 4 core blueprints. Okay, that means there's, any type of violent criminal, the way that they're going to rape, murder, or assault is going to fall into one of 4 kind of blueprints, classifications for how they're going to conduct their rape, their murder, and their assault. Okay, it's not random like people think. They're not a bunch of disorganized, stupid, mindless motherfuckers. Most of them are career fucking criminals. We talked about how our bail system is so fucked up that it's like, these violent criminals are being fucking revolving door. They're being pushed right back out onto the fucking street. A lot of times their charges being stayed for very serious crimes because the justice system is so fucking overloaded and overwhelmed and underfunded and all this stuff. And these fuckers are reoffending. Well, you don't think that they figure shit out? Like, how do I become better at my craft? Right? The more you do something, the better you get. They're highly motivated to become very efficient at rape, murder, and assault. Okay, so that's the bad guy blueprint. Understand that. Well, as Protectars, the weaponized system, we have our own playbook. We have the counter strategies. And there are 10 strategies, 10 core strategies that make up our playbook. So understand right now, what is a strategy? Well, a strategy is an overarching plan, right? Like what is the overall strategies that we need to employ against these fucking bad guys? Then we have the tactics for how we're going to make those strategies work. And then we have the tools that we can use to help implement the tactics and the strategy. So it's strategy, tactics, tools. We talk lots about this. Well, at the core, if somebody said, well, sum up your 10 strategies without going into the specifics of each strategy. One of the phrases I would use, one of the core things would be shock and awe. Right? Now, that is a huge part of it. And so I want to talk about this tonight, and I want to kind of present maybe an angle that most people wouldn't think of this. Because right now you might say, oh, I know what he's talking about. You gotta run a shock and awe campaign on the enemy. You gotta fucking nail them with overwhelming, displays of force and all that stuff. And it's like, yeah. But there's actually a different angle that most people don't see, and I want to talk about it tonight. But before I get into that, let me just get your guys' visceral feedback on what shock and awe means to you, and how, just whatever your experience with it, what it means to you, how vital of a role, in your opinion, does it play in the weaponizing process, and how important do you think it's going to be for people to understand as we, unpack this tonight? How important is it for them to understand and learn the shock and awe strategy, tactics, and tools?
I think you opened a really big can there with that question. Kind of like, wait, what do you guys think about color? Tell me about color. It's like, man, there's a million things. I think we could probably spend the whole podcast just talking about what you just asked. Mm-hmm. But just to narrow in on one thing, as you were talking, like two words that just hit me right away when you talk shock and awe. For me, it's suddenness and unexpectedness, if that's even a word. But you get the point.
Yep. And
like you just alluded to, you said, I think a lot of people, they hear shock and awe, they're a bit familiar with it. Right away, they might think overwhelming. And it's like, well, is it overwhelming? Well, of course it is. But maybe not in the way that people would expect. And you kind of started to touch on this, where it's like, not overwhelming because I'm bigger, stronger, better. I mean, that would be great. But that's not the case. So to me, it's like, so I don't connect to overwhelming the same way. Overwhelming in the sense that it's unexpected. It's extremely sudden. Do you know what I mean? So those two words for me are very much connected to shock and awe, because that's a big part of our whole response chain, to violent criminals. So
yeah, 100%. No, I love it, and I'll expand more, but we'll let Brad go first. But that's a really great way to narrow in on a very, like you said, a very big subject. It's a broad subject.
Yeah, for me, right off the bat, it's a strategy that I always envision when we're running our scenario training and stuff like that. It's something that I lean into a ton. It works for me. I love it. And you know what? Like, one of the things that, like Dustin said, there's many ways that we could go about talking about this. And there are misconceptions like, oh yeah, I just gotta attack the guy like real hard, real fast, and like before he even. I'm like, well, it's not really like, when I think about it at first glance, just even hearing you talk about it, one of the things that it really brought me back to is the turret, or the foundation that this strategy is actually going to be launched from. And I think for me, that's why I like to lean into that. It doesn't work if you don't launch it from the right turret or the right foundation. If that makes sense. I don't want to give away too much of probably what the lead, but like that's a big part of it for me for sure.
Okay, perfect. All right, a couple things. You both, obviously, of course, we're it's a broad subject, and we're trying to narrow it down to get everybody at the same start point, right? So a couple things. One, Dustin, you're talking about three fundamentals that are also part of our core strategy. So we say, listen, the shock and awe campaign. right? We run a shock and awe offensive. That is a strategic goal of ours. Right away, that led Dustin to think about speed, surprise, and violence of action. Those are 3 ingredients that make up the shock and awe offensive: speed, surprise, and violence of action. Now, we could take out each of these ingredients and break them down because, for example, speed is not what most people think it is. Most people think speed and they think initiation speed, like they think raw human speed, like how fast are you? How fast can you throw a punch? How fast can you throw a kick? How fast can you explode in and take someone down or whatever it is? They just that's like initiation speed. There's at least 6 different types of speed, right? Initiation speed, alteration speed, overall raw speed. Like there's different types of speed. So people think, oh, speed. They're talking about just like train hard and become like super fucking fast. Okay, that helps, but that's an attribute. But let's take this. That's not what we're talking about. The shock and awe offensive relies on speed. But the type of speed that it relies on is, to me, more of the shortened reaction model, right? Meaning that you have been training and now you have viscerally imparted a survival motor skills into you, meaning that when there's a certain stimulus, that triggers a response. So it's a stimulus response. So you perceive a threat, we analyze, evaluate that threat. We don't have to go into the formulation stage. We go straight to download. Stimulus, response. Perceive, analyze, evaluate, download. Perceive, is this a threat? What level of threat? Boom, download. So stimulus, response. That's fast. A bad guy walks up, he picks a target, he thinks there's a fucking target. That's a victim. And so he walks up, he starts working his process, his game plan, his blueprint, and all of a sudden, his blueprint is fucking hit on the blind side because the person he thought was a victim turns out to be a weaponized motherfucker, and he goes from stimulus, he feels the threat, sees it or hears it, and goes from stimulus to response, and that guy is caught on the fucking blind side. That's the type of speed we're talking about. That directly correlates to creating shock and awe offensive. Okay, so surprise. Well, let's just continue that out. If you have the ability, if your stimulus response, if your reaction model is so short and so tight, meaning, again, it's like if you're sitting in a drag car and you're watching the light tree, right? You know, it's changing colors and then it gets to green. How fast does a professional race car driver, professional dragster, how fast does that guy see that and hit the pedal? A lot fucking faster than your average human being, right? With no training and no experience, right? You get what I'm saying? Now, that's what we're talking about. So that speed, that equates into a certain amount of, like that, you go, fuck, there's going to be a surprise in that, isn't there? But surprise goes a little bit deeper. Because the surprise is not only did this guy go stimulus response, already made the decisions like, will I defend myself? Want to defend myself? Do I know when I can legally defend myself? And will I recognize the sequencing? All of that's done. That's the speed. The surprise also comes because you go, not only was that stimulus response fucking fast, lightning fucking fast. So you're lightning fast off the fucking line. The surprise goes, oh motherfucker. In addition to that, synergizing that, the fuckers got an actual battle plan. Like they didn't just fire a fucking punch. They didn't just, come running at me willy-nilly. Like fuckers come at me with some surgicalness. You know what I mean? They come at me with some strategies and tactics. Like there's actually a fucking objective in that. That ups the surprise factor. Imagine looking at someone and go, look at this fucking old man. This old man's such a victim. This old man's helpless. This old man's weak. He's bent over walking with a cane. I seen a guy by the name of Dr. fucking G, who's part of Merrill's Marauders, who had hundreds of kills in combat, walk into a room that, as he was about to teach the seminar. I remember looking, he had a fishing vest on, and he had a cane, and he was bent over. And the guy looked fucking, it turns out he was almost 80% fucking disabled from war injuries. And then all of a sudden that little old man disappeared and this other guy walks back in the room in fucking fatigues. You still got the cane with him, but he's upright, he's walking. He flipped a fucking switch. And all of a sudden this motherfucker's throwing people around the room like, the last place I wanted to be was anywhere within a proximity next to that fucker. Like there's a surprise, that shit. So there's speed and there's surprise when you are fucking, you find out the motherfucker you thought was a victim is a chess master. Okay? And then the violence of action, again, a lot of people think, oh, yes, the sadistic desire to kill, like the violence of action, like you're right to cutting throats and ripping out hearts and all that stuff. Listen, at the end of the day, when you talk about violence, you have to understand that the foundation of violence is relaying injury up to and including lethal force. That means taking someone's life. But that's not the objective. The objective is the violence of action is every single thing that you do, every breath, every blink of the eye, every twitch of every single muscle fiber is all about leading to the downfall or neutralizing the threat of somebody that is a threat to you. So I want people to understand it's not this, I gotta fucking kill. It is far more ruthless than that. It is far more surgical than that. And yet it's not tied to what degree of injury you want to achieve. If I asked you guys a question, what degree of injury do you want to relay in any life and death situation that you might find yourself in? What degree of injury do you want to relay onto your enemy?
What's necessary?
Okay. The degree to which, what's that, Brad?
Is exact words that I was going to say.
Yeah. So if I paraphrase it, the degree of injury to where a threat, a known threat, is no longer a threat. That's it. It's not personal. There's a threat energy in front of you. Now, I get a lot of people be like, fuck you, it's not fucking personal. Someone trying to murder you and your family, it's not personal. Because if you get into the whole personal side, you will blur the line between defending and punishing. And then you're going to have some legal problems. Go ahead.
We talked about that in a previous podcast. It was already months ago, but I remember this came up, and it was, how did we say it? We talked about, well, what is your goal? Our goal is not to go out there and get them. We're not out there to get the bad guys.
Yep.
Our goal is for the good people to survive and thrive.
100%.
And that might be me, and that might be some person I don't even know.
Yep.
But yeah, it's not. That's why it's not personal, because I'm not out there trying to find the bad guys. I'm not hunting down bad guys to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
But if I'm there,
yeah,
then yeah, the good people have to come out alive.
100%. And that's one of the safety things, right? Is understanding, well, what constitutes a threat? That's why the whole perceive, analyze, evaluate. Is this a threat? What level of threat? Well, that's called threat recognition. You have to train that part of your brain so that you actually understand in fractions of seconds when the stimulus hits, is this a threat? Yes or no? What level of threat? Low, medium, or high. Instantaneously, your use of force options are crystal clear. It's all happening as fast as you can blink, because that's what the training does. No need to formulate. No need to think, no need to pause, no need to hesitate. It just is what it is, and you perceive, analyze, evaluate, and you fucking go straight to download. So the violence of action is going 10. It's like, yeah, I'll defend up to including using lethal force in the preservation of innocent life. But it has nothing to do with that's where I gotta get, or that's what it's gonna take. It'll take what it's gonna take. Okay, so the shock and awe campaign, if people see speed, surprise, and violence of action, and they truly understand what those mean, you go, holy fuck, that's a shock and awe campaign. Because if you stimulus response quick, you got the speed, the surprise is you've been trained. You actually have strategies, tactics, and tools designed for this shit. That's a hell of a fucking surprise to a guy who thought you were a fucking victim. And then the violence of action is you are literally no psychological, no moral, no emotional hindrances. You go all in until the threat is no longer a threat. Whether that took one thing or it took 5 things is irrelevant to us. It is just, you're not a threat. It's create a gap. You're not a threat. Create a gap in the energy. We remove ourselves. Now, maybe that energy gets up after and becomes a threat again, but I ain't fucking there. My family's not there. The other innocent people aren't there. So fuck them. My job is not to punish him. My job is just to neutralize the threat. No longer grievous bodily harm or death. That's not on the table. I'm done. And you fucking remove yourself. Now, you could go in to say, what if, and should you hold him, detain him, wait for the police to arrive and stuff. That's all situational, and we're not going to get into that. That depends on the level of safety training, all that shit. That's a different conversation. Okay, so shock and awe, speed, surprise, violence of action. So all of our strategies are based around that. Okay. Then the next thing of this that I thought is so important is I kind of share with you the definition, right? It's a shock and awe is a strategy based on using overwhelming power and spectacular displays of force to paralyze the enemy's perception of the fight or the battlefield and to destroy their will to fight. So let's break this down. Shock and awe, to affect will perception and understanding. Okay, now I think if you just parallel what we just talked about with speed, surprise, and violence of action, how does that impact will? Right? How does it impact their will to want to fight? Well, when they come into this, the speed destroys a lot of that will. Because all of a sudden you're like, you're a fucking victim, and not only are you not a victim, all of a sudden you're like, you are fucking decisive in your initiative. It's stimulus response. I mean, like, that takes, it's like you go to pet a dog and that dog fucking tries to rip your arm off. It's like the speed at which that animal turned on you, it takes away a lot of your will to want to do anything. Okay? How does it fuck with their perception? Well, again, the surprise. I thought you're a victim. Turns out you're some sort of fucking evil fucking doom on you chess master. You know what I mean? Like, you actually have strategies, tactics, and tools designed for this shit? Like, how did you get so smart as to anticipate that there are bad people in this world who might try to hurt you and actually take preventative measures? Wow, like, holy fuck. That fucks their perception up. Not victim, but protector. Not victim, but weaponized. Like, that's a whole different, that changes the perception. And of course, when you rattle the will and you rattle the perception, their understanding of what the fuck is happening is going to really be challenged because they are the bad guy. And what do bad guys, how do bad guys, what's their understanding of who they are and how this dynamic works? I'm predator, you're prey, predators eat prey. Predators attack, prey gets eaten. Right? So it's a very difficult thing for them to understand. Does that kind of make sense? So here's what's interesting. Here's where I think this is a slightly different take on this conversation. Okay. I was working with, again, one of our guys. We do the Weaponized 16, so 16 one-hour private lessons. We build the foundation, take them from zero to formidable, right? Strategy, tactics, and tools so that they can execute exactly what we're talking about, shock and awe. So as I was going through this, now imagine somebody with no experience. Now, I would say like an average male, average man. He's in his, early 40s, and average build, average fitness, average, normal guy like the rest of us, right? Works, all that type of stuff. But as we go through, we are on 14 out of 16 privates, so we're getting to the end. Now, being that deep into that, I have him executing the kill chain, right? Running through our strategies, connecting them all together, right? Trojan horse, flashbang, smash and grab, avalanche, how you relay injury, and then Trojan horse, like he's running through the kill chain. Now, as he's doing this, I watch him, right? We're working with him. You say, well, listen, how good can somebody be in 14 hours? Now, that's give or take because most privates go a little longer than an hour, but 14 hours. How good can the guy be? Well, pretty good. Why? Because he's getting one-on-one in coaching, right? So he's getting a direct process implemented and shared with him from somebody who's been doing it for 30 years. So it's not the first time, it's not the third time, it's not the 300th time. I've done this thousands of times for people. So that makes things streamlined. But here's what I want you to understand. When I'm showing him this and they say, okay, the strategy, now I can feel it. The first few times that he's executing the kill chain all together, and I want people to think about this. When he's doing it, he gets into his head and he becomes aware. And what do you think he becomes aware of as I'm feeding stimulus and he's responding, viscerally feeling it, and as he starts executing the strategy, tactics, and tools, he becomes aware of something, and that awareness pulls him out of things a little bit, pulls him out of the flow state. What do you think it is that he's becoming aware of?
Probably becoming self-aware.
Self-aware is 100% correct, and self-aware of what? All of his and any little tiny
mistakes or how it looks.
Perfect.
Combat accuracy.
There you go. And Brad just hit on the word we're going to talk about, right? He's becoming self-aware. So there's this stimulus, and all of a sudden he's like, listen, we've been conditioning him using operant conditioning, stimulus response. So just like a doctor takes the rubber mallet, hits you on the knee, your foot twitches, right? That stimulus response. Operant conditioning, you know what I mean? Like stimulus response. So when I feed a stimulus, his body's already into motion. The stimulus is creating the response in him. It's bypassing his brain. You can't trust the brain. The logical brain is too slow and plodding to have anything to do with survival situations. The fucking wild brain is the brain that has to be conditioned this way. So all of a sudden he's going stimulus response. He pulls the fucking trigger. And when you pull the trigger, the bullet shoots. And so he's doing it. But all of a sudden, that logical brain, the part rational thinking, self-awareness, all of a sudden he becomes self-aware of how an elbow or a knee or how a smash and grab or forward pressure or structure or head position or weight bound, whatever the fuck it is, he becomes aware and goes, ooh, that wasn't quite right. That wasn't, oh shit, oh this. The more he becomes self-aware of little defects, okay, and this is what we call combat accuracy. Meaning that under stress, nothing feels the same as when you're standing on the firing range, practicing, dry firing, whatever. When you're doing target practice, it's completely fucking different than when somebody starts shooting back. That's a gunfight. So target practice and a gunfight are two different fucking things. Now, you can train and simulate a gunfight, and that better prepares you for the gunfight, stimulus response, all that shit. But so all of a sudden he becomes self-aware, and that self-awareness impacts him in what ways? List a couple ways that impacts him. There's lots.
Self-doubt.
Beautiful one. Self-fucking-doubt. What else?
Hesitation,
beautiful. Analysis paralysis, right? You start over-analyzing and you're thinking about all this shit, right? Anything else? Those are two of the big ones. Anything else?
Yeah, focus, right? I'm going to use intensity as a word, right? Which I don't mean physical ramped up intensity, but intensity in terms of emotional certainty.
Beautiful. Killer instinct goes where? Straight out the fucking window.
Yeah.
Like the second you become aware, second you have any little bit of like, ooh, that wasn't quite right. Oh, that was like all of a sudden a little bit of uncertainty. All of a sudden a little bit of fucking hesitation. You slow. I better correct that. Repetition. You start trying to do. Oh, that wasn't right. I better do that again. So like backtracking. Backtracking in a combat situation is never typically good, right? So killer instinct. All of these. There's all of these negative things that start to happen. And guess what? What happens to the effectiveness of the kill chain? What happens to the shock and awe campaign if these little things start to creep in? What if I said it started to creep in at 20%? So it has a 20% effect on his overall game. What do you think happens to a shock and awe campaign when 20% of the of the overwhelming power and spectacular displays of force are diminished by 20%?
Oh yeah, it starts to break down. It's falling apart.
Yeah, I guess instead of shock, it's mild surprise, and instead of awe, it's interesting. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, you take these powerful words of like shock and awe, and it's, you know what I mean? Huh? And it changes the game of these things. Okay, and so here's what I said to them, and I want your guys' opinion on this because, well, actually, I'll even just lead you to it, and you'll figure out because it's the exact same thing you would have said to them. But when you have somebody that's new into this and say, listen, strategy is the most important thing. And every strategy that we have, Trojan horse, flashbang, smash and grab, avalanche, just to name, 4 to the 10. Every strategy we have is designed. Its sole purpose is to destroy the bad guy's objective, not to fight the man. Right? You cannot get sucked into a fight with bigger, stronger, better armed, outnumbered groups of individuals. So every strategy is designed to destroy their objective, okay? Every tactic is designed to use the least amount of effort, the least amount of training, least amount of skill. So what is the simplest tactic that will achieve the end strategy? Destroy their objective. And then what tool is the simplest fucking tool? Now, you have one of two ways that you can go. You're brand new. You're 14 hours into this. The strategies fucking work. They've been battle tested. Not pressure tested, battle tested, right? Blood has been spilt, proving or disproving the effectiveness, and that has been how these strategies have been refined. People have taken these strategies, people have gone to war with these strategies, people have won and people have lost with these strategies, and that is what shaped the strategy. So I was always told and taught and had a respect that these are blood tested. Okay, people always talk about pressure tested. These are blood tested. Okay, so what happens with that is we know they work. You might know they work. But what happens at this point now is you got to recognize that you get in your head and start thinking that you have to have certain level of technical proficiency. You have to, you know what I mean? You start worrying about doing everything perfect. But what do you think is the most important aspect to have in there, and how do you get them to achieve it? Well, the answer becomes easy because it's the title of tonight's podcast. What is the most important thing that I want them to focus in on? Not the quality of the elbow, right? The shock and awe. The shock and awe of it. And you see where, like, when you step back and separate, so I had this guy and so sitting there saying, listen, you've been doing this for 14 hours. You know, if we're building a samurai sword, we've been folding the steel, you know, hammering and folding, heating and folding and hammering the steel. We don't have it. We don't have a finished sword yet. But what you have can cut, and what you have can stab, and what you have can defend and take life if you need it to be. But what I need you to start doing is when I feed the stimulus and that visceral trigger gets pulled in you, right? Because it's legally and morally warranted. When I feed the stimulus and you pull, understand that what you're doing, commit to it. Because if the efficiency of the strategies, tactics, and tools, if they come out, the efficiency comes out at 20%, but you fucking commit to the action like you're jumping out of a fucking plane, like you commit to the action at 100%, and you ignore any feedback that would take away from your commitment to execute this fucking kill chain, your commitment to fucking defend your fucking life in the face of imminent grievous bodily harm or death. If you do that 100%, guess what? Built into the strategy is the shock, is the awe, and because it has the speed, the surprise, and the violence of action. Does that make sense? And so all of a sudden you're like, the guy literally looks at me and goes, oh, so like, I don't have to worry about any one particular tool and being perfect at it. I don't have to worry about one particular tactic and being like bang on with that. I don't even have to really worry about the strategy because like it's just viscerally imparted to me. The only thing I have to do is recognize what? That your whole goal is to just shock and awe the motherfucker. Like that's it. That is I'm talking about it from the point of an emotional state that you're executing on and that you are creating. Remember this, shock and awe, impact their will, impact their perception, and impact their understanding. Speed, surprise, and violence of action does not have to be tied to the level of efficiency of those tools, of those tactics, or of those strategies necessarily. They're into the commitment side of it. The strategy funnels and directs the commitment. It's like gives it a more functional outlet, but it doesn't have to be all that efficient to work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, to me, it's just like we always do with everything we do in our training is we're always talking about the why behind what you're doing, which is exactly what you're talking about with that guy you're doing the private with today. It's like you're just trying to get him to focus in on the why.
Yes.
Why do you use these 10 strategies? Well, because they cause shock and awe. It's simple,
Yes.
right? But like, look at a boxer. Why does a boxer jab, cross, hook, uppercut? Well, because that's what boxers do.
Yep.
Why does the kickboxer kick and punch? Well, because that's what kickboxers do.
Yeah.
Why do weaponized protectors do what they do? Because it creates shock and awe.
Yes.
And if someone shows me something different that creates shock and awe better, I'll switch right now.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? Do you know what I mean? It comes back to that whole loyalty to arts and all that stuff. And it's like, because all we care about is the why behind what we do. And that's what tonight is. This is just the why, shock and awe.
100%. Brad, you want to throw something on downrange with that?
Yeah, the only real quick, I think that it's just important, and I know we hammer this all the time, but strategy outweighs any tool 1,000,000 times to 1. Like it just you're never putting if you try to put a tool first, the strategy's gone, right? And that's I think kind of what we're saying. It's like the strategy is number 1, right? And if you put your commitment into that strategy, and your tools are, the strategy is still effective
100%.
because it's the strategy that leads the way. It's a strategy It's a strategy that gets the result, not the tool.
100%. And just to finish this, right, because that's why I tried to paint two pictures. Someone with 14 hours of experience, able-bodied man, but, average, but, he's got his average level of attributes and some things high, whatever. But in 14 hours, he executes, but then he becomes self-aware. And he becomes self-aware where he goes, fuck. At the end of the day, I'm trying to build a samurai sword. And what I see in my head is the finished sword. The polish, the reflection, the edge on the blade, the tempered steel, it's a fucking work of art that took many, many hours, all that stuff. You don't have that. At 14 hours, you don't have that. But you don't fucking need that. Take that samurai sword backwards and can it cut, can it stab? Yeah. Is it going to be as efficient as the end product? No. But the point is, shock and awe in the beginning, with the second, so that he became self-aware and it started to deteriorate. His mind started to block his commitment. So it's putting him at greater risk. The refocus is, stop worrying about that bullshit. Like you can do what you can do right now. Whether if you're talking about something so tangible, if you're talking about an elbow, you can elbow the way you can elbow right now. That's as good as it's going to fucking get right now in this moment. All the worry and wonder, and you can't do fucking shit about it. That's where it is right now. But luckily, elbows don't protect. Like elbows don't win violent encounters. Strategies do. That tactic is only as good as it can get. But don't worry about that because tactics don't win battles. Strategies do. They each play a contributing role to that, but it's the commitment to pull the trigger and go into that. And so the second that I got him refocused on it's shock and awe is what you're trying to create. My mentor used to always say to me, that guy might have been a better fighter than me, but we'll never know because I was never going to stick around and fight him. Shock and awe. Get in, get the fuck out, shock and awe. And all of a sudden, he gets right back. So a guy at 14 hours starts committing deep because he feels the strategy. He goes, I get it, I understand it. And then his commitment goes through the roof. How many hours do you have to train to have commitment?
Very little. You just need to be introduced to something that you believe.
So how many hours would that be if the second you got introduced to something you believe?
None.
0. That's right. You remember what people are saying, change is so hard. Change is not hard at all. Change is instantaneous. The second you decide really truly make a decision to change, change happens instantaneously. Getting to the point where you're ready to make the change, that's what takes time. So the second that you introduce people's strategy and the second that their belief comes online. Now listen, most guys when they come to this, they already have the commitment. Because why do you think they came to us? Because we don't market to everybody that needs what we do. We market left of center. And that means we market to the people that believe what we believe. That's it. And if you believe that there are more and more pieces of shit on this, like being kicked out of the prisons and being pushed back out onto the streets and violently reoffending, and that they are targeting innocent good people, and if you believe that there's a very high probability that you or your family is going to be one of those intended targets, if you believe that, then when you come in, you already have 100% commitment. The only people that walk in these doors that don't have 100% commitment are the people that think somewhere in their mind, it'll probably never happen to me. I mean, it's probably good to know, but I probably don't really need it. You're going to have a fucking problem. Simple. That's it. You're going to have a fucking problem because no matter how good you are, no matter what somebody shows you, you'll hesitate. You'll benefit of the doubt yourself a fraction of a second longer than you fucking should have because you actually don't have the fucking belief that this is a necessity. That's why that's what it takes. That's what we vet people. This ain't a fucking hobby. This ain't for this. You want to lose 50 pounds, take your fat ass to a gym. Like, you know what I mean? I'm not here for your weight loss. Now, I don't give a fuck if you're 200 pounds overweight and got health problems, but you have the desire to want to protect yourself. That's what we're here for. Not weight loss, not recreation, none of that bullshit. We're here to teach you how to weaponize against violence. That's what it's about. And I don't care who you are. I don't care what everything can be adapted. You got people that are stuck in fucking wheelchairs. You got people that are, have injuries from accidents and whatever and can't move the same. It doesn't matter. You have a right to defend yourself. Everything can be adapted so that everybody has the opportunity to defend themselves. I believe that. But what does it take? Fucking commitment. And the funniest thing is, right, you get somebody that comes in that has a disability. You get somebody come in that has a problem. They have to walk with a cane. You get somebody come in that's in a wheelchair. You get somebody come in that's fucking blind. You get somebody comes in as whatever. Guess what they have more than most quote unquote normal healthy people? They have a fucking commitment. And why?
Because they got a good reason to. There's no denial there. They
Yeah.
understand 100% that they're going to be seen potentially as a victim.
Yeah. Well, and
that
really,
they
let's
need
go
these-
one step further. Let's be honest. They already have been.
Yeah.
Anyone know somebody that's in a wheelchair that went to a party that got dumped out of the wheelchair and they threw the wheelchair off the third floor balcony and thought it was fucking funny, so they pushed someone in a wheelchair and tossed the wheelchair over the balcony? Right? Yeah, we know, right? That's people think, who the fuck would do that? Well, people would do that. And that's actually good people that are fucking drunk being fucking idiots. That's not predatory violent criminals. So what do you think a predatory violent criminal would do? You know what I mean? So these people that are at a disadvantage for whatever reason or perceived disadvantage are typically have already become targets. They've already experienced, the bias that comes with that and the fallout from that. So they come in going, I'm 1,000% committed to defending my life. That's why I'm fucking here. Right? So that commitment is huge. And when you get people to, when that's the primer, and when the trigger gets pulled, that's the primer that ignites that. And so that shock and awe is in the beginning. That is what you're running off of, is to create the shock and awe. Now the other side of that is, let's be honest, and talking to this guy saying 14 hours, can you create shock and awe? Yes, you can, because not only do you have the commitment, but you have base strategy, tactics, and tools. And in 16 hours of private training, done in the right way, people have been doing it for 30 fucking years, and it's not our first rodeo. You get a base of skill you get from zero to formidable. And zero to formidable is you're operating, depending on the individual, 30, 40, 50% efficiency. Because it's combat. It's not fighting training for someone for the fucking ring to fight against another well-trained fighter. That's totally different. You're operating at a very high level of efficiency. But you're not the samurai sword yet, but you got the commitment. So guess what I tell them too, so they understand this. You'll create the shock and awe. You'll fucking overwhelm them with all of this strategy, tactics, and tools, and then you're going to create a gap that's going to allow you to get the fuck out and your family to get out. And you know what? Probably within 90 seconds to 2 minutes, maybe 3, that guy's going to get up again. And how much injury do you think he'll actually have?
Not that much.
Probably not that much.
Not that much.
Yeah, probably not that much injury. And now, could there be a lot of injury? Yeah. You could hit the guy with one thing, he slips on the floor, smacks his head, you could kill him. Now remember, if you're legally justified to defend yourself, then you had to do what you had to do. But I'm saying that at the end of the day, you're probably not going to relay as much injury as you think you are. Why? Because you're just not as efficient yet. You're formidable. But the shock and awe is what you need. You only need to be formidable, get the shock and awe to save your fucking life. That's where it starts. That can save your life. I've had situations where, you have to defend yourself. You execute on the kill chain, and later that they got up and were not that injured. Because I didn't have a lot of the training in, but it worked. Did I get home? Yes. Am I safe? Yes. Did I absorb damage? Not really at all. So did it work? Yeah, it worked. But guess what happens now? Now someone says, well, what if I go past the 14 hours? What if I get to 30 hours, 40 hours, 100 hours, 400 hours, 500 hours, 1,000 hours, 2,000 hours? Are you still executing shock and awe? Are you still using speed, surprise, and violence of action? Yes. Do you still have the commitment? Even more so, because you're educated, so you know your legal rights better. You know your moral ground, high grounds better. So the commitment is even bulletproofed. But what else has changed now? What else has the gift of time given you?
That's where the efficiency comes up.
You stop being formidable and you go and move on to tactical, and you can move on to surgical, and you can move on to whatever other, whatever other levels you want a name to it or attach to it if you need that. You become more efficient. I just like you become more efficient. You become more surgical. You take it from a floodlight down to a flashlight, down to a laser pointer. And it's like now all of a sudden you fucking shock and awe, drive in, and you are targeting that cheekbone, that eye socket, that eyeball, that Adam's apple, that, those carotid arteries. You're targeting, Achilles, whatever it is with the knife. You're fucking surgical. And so in the same amount of time frame, you're not just shock and awe and overwhelming them. You are shock and awe and surgically dismantling, which ends the threat even sooner. Now, it might be the same time frame elapses. You remove yourself, there's the gap, they're no longer a threat. You remove yourself. The difference is that guy's not getting up the same way 90 seconds later or 2 minutes later or 3 minutes later. He's not getting up going, what the fuck, motherfucker caught me on the blind side. But if I see that guy again, I'm going to fucking kill him and blah, 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 blah. Because you've relayed injury in a far more surgical, efficient manner. Now, with that also comes, a lot of times, you need to do less. The threat stops being a threat even earlier. Like, I've seen this. I've seen newer guys. I've been that newer guy. You defend yourself, and the whole thing's 3, 4, 5 seconds. Let's just say 5 seconds. The whole thing. That's pretty quick, because it's violence. It's not a fight. If you're not this is not antisocial aggression where you're standing outside throwing 50, 100 punches with some other dipshit over ego and bullshit. It's asocial violence. 5 seconds is a long fucking time, and you throw whatever comes out in that 5 seconds. And then the threat is neutralized enough that you remove yourself. Most times, doesn't even come anywhere close to having to take life because the shock and awe was so effective. Overwhelmed them, created the gap, they're no longer a threat, you get the fuck out. Then 90 seconds, 60 seconds later, that threat reignites, but you're no longer there. So you can be all the threat you want so long as me and mine aren't there. Okay, but people would look at it and say, oh, but you didn't finish them. Never the goal. Then you see people that have a different depth of experience. They're not just formidable, they're tactical, they're surgical. And instead of a 5-second situation, that same seconds goes 1.5 seconds. Because when the shock and awe, when you hit the strategic targets in a more brutally efficient manner, with that same level of commitment, the threat shuts off a lot fucking earlier, typically. Right? There's always exceptions. Right? You can have people so fucked up that, you get what I mean? But typically. So all of a sudden now, the level of commitment and the fact that your strategy tag tools are centered on a shock and awe, you tend to shut them down quicker. And at the end of the day, you've had to do less, which means that they've sustained bigger injury, but less injury, if that makes sense. Is that, you know what I mean? If all of a sudden there's a devastating knee or a thumb goes in the eye, and you say, well, that shut down that fucking eye or shut down the system, and they drop to the floor, because you're that efficient, or that knee, blew out their fucking knee joint or tore their quad in half, or that elbow, shattered the orbital bones and the eye falls back into the skull, and that's enough to shut that guy down. That injury wasn't the shattering of the orbital bones and the eye falling into the skull, plus fractured jaw, fractured ribs, ripped ear, bit throat. You get what I mean? Because someone who's less efficient is relaying more, is firing more rounds. Maybe there's less injury, but at the end of the day, it could be more cumulative injury. Does that make sense? So again, when you go to 10, the more all in you go, the less violence you typically have to use. But it's the willingness to go 10. And it's the willingness to go fucking shock and awe. What's going to shock and awe somebody? Don't pull the throttle back. If all of your strategies, tactics, and tools are predicated on shock and awe, don't pull the throttle back. You know what I mean, right? Overwhelming power, spectacular displays of force to paralyze the enemy's will, perception, and understanding. Don't pull back on the throttle. So hopefully what I wanted to convey in tonight's podcast was that the shock and awe strategy, it's like, again, look at what you're doing to defend yourself. Are you training tools? Because most people train tools, and they say because a boxer boxes and he uses his hands to punch, the tactics are built around the tool. They're built around the range. They're built around the rules. Right? So the tool, boxing, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, the tools, the techniques, then the tactics are built around those, and then the strategies, well, if I have to use this tool, because to be a boxer, you got to box. So you got to use boxing. So you get what I mean? So then the strategies are, your only options for strategies are those that align with the tool and the tactics that have been forced in front of you. That say, well, this is the style. Here you go. Whereas when you reverse that whole process, the strategy leads first, then the tactics and tools are all adaptable. So you can create the shock and awe. So is that like, what's the game plan? What's the strategy here, folks? That's what's got to come first. And it should be predicated off shock and awe. Why? Because you're outgunned, outmanned, outnumbered, out-equipped, and often outpositioned. There's no sport in the world. Well, there's some crazy sports in the world. Most of the sports in the world.
Mostly in Russia.
Yeah, there's some crazy fucking shit going on out there, right? But most sports are not predicated off. Here's a great idea. Let's get one person outgunned, outmanned, out-equipped, outnumbered, and outpositioned, and that'll be some entertainment. And it will be for about 3 to 5 seconds, and then it'll just become a spectacle of destruction. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not going to be, depends who you are, it's not going to be great viewing. So, yeah, this is, that's what I think people need to look at. Because bad guys ambush. And we always say that one of our sayings is this: if you can't do what they can do, you're dead. Everything we're talking about tonight, flip it. Welcome to the education of a bad guy. Welcome to the education of a violent, predatory criminal. Here, guys, when you're out there victimizing people, here's some of the things you want to do. They might be big and strong. They might surprise you. You might look at an older guy walking with a cane, and for all you know, that motherfucker's got a concealed carry under his jacket. For all you know, he pulls that cane apart and a fucking sword comes out and he shoves it through your throat. Here's what we should do, right? To better rape, assault, and murder, we should use a shock and awe campaign. We should catch them on the blind side. We should overwhelm them, outnumber them, outposition them, out-equip them, and we should fucking blitz them and catch them on the blind side. Don't even give them a fucking half a chance, right? Catch them at life factor moments, when they're at the most vulnerable. Catch them when they're vulnerable because they've got kids and dependents with them and a spouse with them, because those are liabilities. If we threaten them and isolate them and take them, then he's going to submit. Like, do you get what I mean? Like, this shit just goes like, that makes sense, that makes sense, that makes sense, that makes sense. And violent criminals going, yeah, fuck this, this is old news to us. Take all the good guys like we're doing, line up and say, hey guys, and give them the same speech. And what are they doing? You're a fucking lunatic. If I did half the shit you're saying, I'm going to fucking jail. Are you kidding me? The UCP government and this government and that government, their fucking laws of this, the police protect violent criminals, they're going to charge you, they're going to do all this shit. All from people that don't understand case law in Canada, have never really investigated, don't know their rights, don't know how the strategies, tactics, and tools integrate with the laws in Canada, the case laws in Canada, where they've proven that we can, up to and including lethal force, defend ourselves, and how we do that. You got to educate. They're educated. They're in and out of the fucking criminal systems. That's how they're doing shit like pushing women in front of trains where they almost lose their fucking leg and their fucking skulls crashed open and have fucking lifelong injuries. And they knew that they're going to get stayed sentences and be fucking back out in the street in a few months. You think they don't know that shit? And why'd they do that? Because you didn't like the way she looked at them. Like, they're educated. And it's a fucking war. And if you can't do what they can do, if you don't understand that strategy, and here's, again, challenging to the people's thinking. Violence and the tool of violence works for both good and bad people. Self-defense and murder is decided after in a court of law. And people don't get that. Violence is a tool, that's it. It's not right and it's not wrong. Right? You think violence is right or wrong? Well, what do you think a military force does when you send them overseas to deal with terrorists? When to deal with oppressive regimes, what do you think they do? You think they go in there with fucking lollipops and candies? They go in there and they use the fucking tool of violence, but they use it to defend a way of life that we all agree as a society is moral and just. But that's our perception of it. The bad guys are using their tool of violence. So you think bad guys and terrorists are the only ones that ambush and the only ones that plant IEDs and the only ones that do all these, spy on people, all this shit. What do you fucking think is happening? How do you think you fight a fucking war? There's rules of engagement. There's a high moral ground. There is the same thing. Our special operations guys, our elite soldiers, go out nightly in those situations and they go out fucking hunting. They go out fucking hunting. They don't wear bright yellow colored vests and spotlight shining, give away their position. They go out fucking hunting. They use the tool of violence. They use it as surgically as possible to mitigate collateral damage, and they do it in a way that our country, our laws, our moral fiber has said is legal, moral, and just. Now, of course, do the lines get grayed? Have soldiers gone over and done? Yes, of course. And there's been court martials and all that stuff. But you get what I'm talking about. If you can't do what they can do, you're bringing a fucking plastic knife to an Uzi fight against 5 guys. So if you're in a situation, I guess maybe here's another analogy. I don't want a bunch of cops on my street that we say, listen, you're here to protect and serve our communities. We authorize you to carry these firearms, to carry these tools. I don't want a cop on my street that when he pulls his gun out because he has to and pulls that trigger because he has to, I don't want him trying to take off the guy's pinky hand so he drops the knife or the blade that's held to some poor innocent person's throat. I want him to put 2, 3, or 4 center mass. I want him to keep shooting until that threat is no longer a threat. That's what I want him to do. That's what he needs to be trained to do. Does he want to do that? No. Do I want him to have to do that? No. But I recognize that he's going to at some point. There's a high probability. And when the time comes, center mass, pull that trigger until they're no longer a threat. Now, if he can do something, if he can hit him with the fucking baton, if he can hit pepper spray or tasers, and that threat is no longer a threat, then I want you to do that. What do I want him to do? I want him to do whatever he needs to do to neutralize the threat, up to and including lethal force. And I trust them and hope that they've been trained well enough that they can understand the difference. So if they need to go lethal force, go lethal force. You don't fuck around. You don't shoot them to wound them and hit them in the leg. That's all Hollywood fucking bullshit. And there's a lot of people that don't get that, won't get that, and I don't give a fuck. Because when somebody's threatening your family, trying to murder your family, I don't know, put them in a pinky lock. I don't care what you do. Do a double leg takedown, sit on him, hold him while his buddy drives a knife through your wife's neck or something like that. That's up to you. Figure out your own moral compass, figure out what shit is. But violence it's about one thing, and that's destruction. Right? And just because of everything I just said, we'll go with Tim Larkin's quote, violence isn't always the answer. Most times it's not the answer. But when it is the answer, it's the only fucking answer. So violence works for good people and bad people equally. Self-defense or murder is determined by the context, which determines the content. That's determined after. So if you know how to read and determine the context, you have no problems delivering the right content. Okay? And that's the healthy moral way to train and understand how to deal with violence. So a little bit off topic with the shock and awe campaign, but I think it was, and I hope that it was appropriate for what we were talking about. So anything else on shock and awe, guys? I actually have a whole other thing I'd like to go into it, but we're already at an hour, so I'm not going to open that can of worms. Like you said, I already opened up a big enough can of shit in the beginning, so we'll just end it there. So anything else on your guys' side?
I don't think we're allowed.
Well, so long as it wraps up, not opens up, then you can fucking say what you want to say, please. Either that or fuck it. We trained to the standard, not to the time. Let's fucking go deep.
Yeah.
Okay, Brad, anything? No?
Yeah, no, I'm good.
Okay, Dustin?
I'm good, man.
He's good, man. Okay. All right. I'm going to end it because I keep looking at it and I keep wanting to say it, but we'll save it for another time. So, all right, everybody, listen, thanks so much. Hopefully you got some value out of tonight's podcast. Again, please like, share, comment, pass it along. That's how we're growing this. The other thing that I'm going to say is, please, I believe desperately right now we need more good men to weaponize. If you haven't listened, go back a couple podcasts. I do a podcast that's called Out of 100 Men. It's very, very important that people listen to this because you got to determine what type of man you're going to be. And 1 out of 100 is going to actually pull the trigger and get the fucking training that they need, weaponize their mind and their body to become a life-saving force in a dark, critical moment. It's not enough to have the willingness. It's not enough just to have the natural courage, because what'll happen is, yes, you can save some lives, but there's a much higher probability that we lose you. Right? We lose you in the effort to save other people. And yes, you might still save people, but the loss of a single protector, a single man that has the willingness and courage to move into harm's way, we cannot afford to lose those men. Okay, so 1 out of 100 will execute and get some training. I don't care what the training is. Try to make it as find something that resonates with you, that is realistic, that I don't care. But get some training. Okay. That's what we need the world to do. So that's my other ask. Just don't be one of those guys that sits around, talking and doing nothing. Okay. We need men of action right now more than ever. And trust me, guys, it's the average man. It's not the superheroes. It's not the most elite and fit among us that are going to do it. There's a few of them there, but most of it is just our quote unquote average guys, right? Okay, so that's it, everybody. Thanks, everybody, again. Stay safe, stay weaponized. We will chat again soon, everybody.